Hi, my name's Owen Goss. I'm one half of Milkbag Games. We're a two-person independent game studio based in Ontario, Canada. Today I'm here to talk to you about our game FutureGrind and why it took us 4.5 years to make a game that we thought could be finished in 6 months. But first, a little bit of background about myself. I've been a professional game developer for over 16 years. I started in the industry at EA Canada as a lead user interface programmer. I worked at Propaganda Games as a lead UI programmer and senior gameplay programmer. And in 2008, I started this whole indie journey and started my own solo studio called Streaming Color. In 2012, I partnered with my friend Matt Ricks, who had made an awesome game called Trainyard, and we started Milkbag Games together. We've been working together since. We are best known for our mobile game Disco Zoo, but we've made a bunch of other games too. But all this is to say that between Matt and myself, we have over 30 years of combined professional game development experience. And I think the overriding theme for today's talk is we should have known better. So let's talk about FutureGrind. FutureGrind is a 3D stunt platformer in which you control a futuristic motorbike that has two colored wheels. You ride on tracks made of floating rails, and you have to match your wheel color to your rail color, or you explode instantly. The game is about chaining together tricks and flips into huge combos and getting high scores and looking awesome and feeling awesome while you do it. Now, you may be looking at these images and asking, Owen, how the hell did you think you could make this game in only 6 months? I have to say, that is an excellent question, because that's exactly what this talk is about. So the truth is, we didn't think we could make this game in 6 months. We thought we could make this game in 6 months. The original concept for FutureGrind was that of a mobile 2D pixel art game, with no story, one bike, and about 20 tracks of gameplay. This is the game we thought we could make in 6 months. But what we ended up making was a console and PC game that was fully 3D, had a story with characters, 5 different bikes that all felt different and controlled differently, 30 tracks spread across 6 environments, 2 boss tracks, and a 4.5-year dev cycle. So let's take a look at what happened. This is the first footage I could find of the very first prototype that Matt built of the game in Unity. The quote on the right is from a development journal that I maintained throughout making FutureGrind. But you can see that the gameplay is already kind of there. This is the summer of 2014, and Matt and I were playing a lot of Ollie Ollie, and it was informing a lot of our discussion around what FutureGrind could be like. I wrote at the time that we wanted high skill expression, tight controls, and lots of excitement. And what happened was, when we started running this prototype on our computers, we realized that having physical buttons under our fingertips really gave us those tight controls that we were looking for at the game. And so we started to wonder if maybe the game was better suited for PC and console instead. And once we made that decision, the idea of doing 2D came into question, and we started wondering if an audience on PC and console would want a 3D game instead. And so I did a 3D mock-up of the game, which we actually didn't like, but we showed the game to some friends, and our friend Ryan Evans, shoutouts to Ryan, took my Unity scene and relit it and added a nice skybox, and for the first time we could start to see the potential for what the game could be like in 3D. Now, I wrote at the time that 3D still makes me nervous in terms of artwork requirements. We knew this was going to be a lot more work, but we thought it might add 6 months to the schedule. This is the first footage I could find of the game running in 3D. So this is Matt's prototype code, but running with a fully 3D environment and models. And to be honest, this is probably the version of the game that we should have shipped. I think this is a game we could have made in 12 to 18 months, and it would have shipped at a better time for us. I wrote at the time that we were trying to have something playable for the IGF in 2014. This is more than 4 years before we actually shipped the game. I'm not sure why we thought we were that close to being done, but at the time we thought we were 6 months from being finished this game. And this is actually a theme throughout the development of FutureGrind. We always thought we were 6 months from being done the game. The problem was, once we had the game running in a 3D environment, we started to wonder why we had to constrain ourselves to a 2-dimensional plane of gameplay. What if we took that 2D plane and put it on a ribbon instead? Now we could bend and twist and turn that ribbon through 3-dimensional space. And so we spent a couple of months prototyping this. And so at the end of December in 2014, Matt and I put his prototype code together with the 3D scene I had been working on, and I wrote that it got us pumped. It felt amazing when we ran this game for the first time, and we got really excited about what the potential for this game was. Now we just have to deliver it. The problem is that we weren't considering all the knock-on scope effects of this switch to 3D. We knew that asset creation was going to take longer. Did I mention I'd never done any 3D modeling before and had to learn how to use Blender and how to think about topology and how to even think about building 3D models? So we knew it was going to take more time, but we vastly underestimated just how much time it was going to take to make this stuff. The other problem was that we didn't consider the effect that switch to 3D would have on all the other gameplay systems. Scene layout took longer and was more complex. Now that it had to work in fully 3D environments, it had to look good from every angle. That meant that the scenes needed to be much more detailed and much more interesting to look at. Track layout became more complex. We wanted 5 different tracks in each environment, and they all had to look good from every angle. Track design became more complex in 3D. The camera system became vastly more complex now that we were in 3D and could bend and twist and turn the gameplay. Lighting was something we had never even thought about in a game before. VFX became more complicated in 3D. Post-effects were a thing. The HUD was now in 3D. Tool creation became more complicated. Performance and memory management was a nightmare. Every single thing became more complex and took longer. I think, in hindsight, the switch from 2D to 3D probably added about 1.5 years to the development time of the game. Okay, but that's not 4.5 years. What else happened? Well, I mentioned that we always thought we were 6 months from being finished the game. And so in 2015, a full 4 years before we actually launched the game, we started showing the game at shows. We took it to the Mix at GDC, PAX West, E3, and PlayStation Experience. We toured around a lot for 1.5 years showing the game. This takes time. We had to build demos. Those demos needed UI work that was custom to these demos and was throwaway. We built gameplay systems that didn't end up in the final game. All of this took a lot of time, not to mention the time actually traveling and attending these shows and then recovering from being sick at the shows. This all takes time. We also did a lot of press and content creator outreach with all of these things. All of this adds up, and I think we spent about 6 months showing the game. Now, at this point, I know what you're thinking. We should realize that we're way over scoped, everything's ballooned out of control, we should just buckle down and make the game, right? No, of course not. What we decided to do instead was add a local multiplayer battle mode to the game. No, I'm not joking. Yes, we actually did this. At some point, we decided that the game needed a local multiplayer battle mode, and we decided to spend a couple of weeks prototyping the thing. What we actually did was spend 2 or 3 months prototyping the thing before we realized it was going to add 6 months to 1 year to the project and decided to scrap the whole thing. Luckily, only 3 months added. Midway through development, we decided we wanted a story for the game. We'd been doing a lot of internal world building to try and make sure that all the environments and gameplay were sort of internally consistent. And the more we explored that, the more we wanted to expose it to the player as well. So we planned out this huge story with multiple characters and tens of thousands of words of dialogue that would be exposed through a very complex user interface that was all based around a text messaging system where you would get assignments from characters. It took us a full 1.5 years to realize that this was ridiculous and cut it down to the scope of what actually shipped in the game, which was a few lines of dialogue every time you unlock a new track. All this story work was another 6 months. Once we had a story, we needed an end. And what better way to end the game than with a few boss tracks? Now, the boss tracks we wanted were procedurally generated infinite tracks. The rest of the game is handmade finite tracks, so this was new systems we needed to build. They included new mechanics. They included animated entities of a complexity we hadn't done in the rest of the game. There's another 3 months. Now that we were going to ship on multiple PC platforms as well as multiple consoles all simultaneously for launch, this meant porting and platform integration. This meant leaderboard work, achievements, cloud saves, file system changes, all of that kind of work that needs to be done for porting to multiple platforms. Not to mention the incredible amount of work that is involved in preparing store metadata for 5 different stores at launch. There's another 3 months. And now, when you work on a game for 4.5 years, there's just a bunch of other stuff that happens in your lives. Our personal lives take time. Both Matt and I have kids. Over the course of development, we suffered deaths in the family. We had serious illness in our families. Both Matt and I moved houses during development, and we also wanted the occasional time off. We were still doing game jams and the occasional prototype through development of FutureGrind. We were doing updates to our game Disco Zoo. We built 2 complete games while we were making FutureGrind and suffered multiple bouts of burnout. And now, the 6 months we spent on Sidewards in the middle of FutureGrind's development may look like a big detour, but I think it was actually really important for us. 3 years into development, we were feeling pretty burnt out on the game. We had this huge story we were planning that we honestly didn't know how to finish writing. We had gameplay systems that were ballooning out of control, and we didn't know how to downscope. So we decided to take a break and make something small and finishable, and that's where Sidewards came in. We spent 6 months making that game and shipped it, and honestly, we came back to FutureGrind feeling energized with clearer heads and fresh eyes, and were able to see at that point how to reduce the scope of everything that we needed to do to actually finish the game. Without that 6 months on Sidewards, I'm not sure we would have finished FutureGrind. Still, you add all that stuff up, and that's another 9 months. So if we take our original estimate of 6 months and we double it, because let's be honest, that game was not going to be shipped in 6 months either, and then add all these other things together, now we've got 4.5 years times 2 people. Okay, but what really happened? What was at the core of all these decisions that made the scope of this game balloon so much? And with hindsight, I think it's actually pretty simple. We fell in love with our game. Early on, we got really excited about the potential for FutureGrind, and we just fell in love with the idea. We wanted to make it the best game that it could possibly be and explore it fully. In 2010, Chris Hecker gave a talk at GDC at the rant session called Please Finish Your Game, in which he asked indie developers in particular to really fully explore the depths of the mechanics of the games they were making. This was something that Matt and I both really embraced at the time. And when I was writing this talk, I went back and I watched Chris's talk again. And I realized that what he said was actually more subtle than just finish your game. What he actually said was, finish your game to the extent that it deserves. And I think this is an important distinction. Yes, in the context of Chris's talk, he was talking about fully exploring mechanics. But I think the flip side of the statement is also true, that you shouldn't finish your game beyond the extent that it deserves. And I think this is what we did with FutureGrind. We fell in love with this game, and we made decisions that weren't in the best interest of finishing the game to the extent that it deserved. We finished it beyond the extent that it deserved. Yes, we're very proud of FutureGrind. We are proud of the game that we made, and we think it's a great game. But I think if we had shipped that 2D game that we were planning 4.5 years earlier, I think it would have been almost as good, and we would have only spent 1 year to 1.5 years making it. So I think one of the biggest takeaways that Matt and I have had from making FutureGrind is to be really careful with the design decisions that we make, and to really consider whether or not they are decisions that are scoping the game beyond the extent that it deserves. And maybe with this in mind, our next game won't also take 4.5 years to make. Thank you.